Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, and I'm calling our Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. I just want to acknowledge that we postponed this meeting from January 9th to today's date in response to inclement weather on January 9th in accordance with procedure bylaw. So we're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. But before our moment of silence, I wish to acknowledge January 15th, which is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Dr. King was an American social activist and Baptist minister who played a key role in the American civil rights movement from the mid-1950s until his assassination in 1968. Dr. King, as we all know, sought equality and human rights for African Americans, and his efforts, of course, reverberated internationally right through to Canada. He was a driving force behind watershed events such as the Montgomery bus boycott and the 1963 March on Washington, which helped to bring about such landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the United States. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, and his teachings reverberate throughout our society even today. So on that note, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. I'm going to move on to our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga Anishinaabeg traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as right holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Before we begin our meeting, I want to highlight some important changes to our council and committee meetings that are now in place. In December 2023, Council approved a new procedural bylaw. Tonight is the first meeting where that bylaw is in effect. Council and Committee of the Whole meetings will now be held on separate evenings, each being held on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Generally, meetings will be on a 3-week cycle. The 2024 Council and Committee of the Whole meeting schedules and agendas are available on the municipal website for everyone to review. And we also have some copies near the door, so you're welcome to pick one up. And we all have laminate copies to keep us on track moving forward as well. So I also want to remind everyone that the intent of Committee of the Whole is to deliberate staff reports, as we will this evening, with the final decision occurring at council meetings, the next one being scheduled for January 23rd, 2024. Public presentations and deputations will also take place at council meetings in 2 weeks, and the purpose of our meeting tonight is to discuss staff reports. If you want to make a presentation to council or provide a deputation on a matter that is on the agenda, please visit the municipal website and submit a form to our clerk. Finally, I am pleased to welcome Councillor Claire Holloway-Wadhwani into the position of Deputy Mayor for the term of 2024. So moving on now, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I note that none were received prior and in advance of today's meeting. We have no correspondence for this evening. We're moving on to item 4, items for consideration. Report 4.1 PD0124 rezoning bylaw amendment application ZB09 2023. The recommended action is that a bylaw be presented to council to rezone the subject lands from Hamlet Residential 1 RESV1 to Hamlet Residential 1 exception number 151, Res V1, 151, Environmental Protection EP and Environmental Protection Floodplain EPF overlay zones. Does staff have anything further that they would like to add before we consider this report?
Through the chair to members of council, not anything in particular beyond the report, although we're very happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward, we believe, but certainly happy to respond.
Okay, thank you, Director. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add before we vote on the matter? Seeing none, can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Todd and seconded by Councillor Less. Can I call a vote, please? All in favor? And that is passed. Moving on to 4.2, Report PD 0224, Sign Variance 90 Walton Street. The recommended action is that the request for variance to bylaw number 17/2005, being a bylaw regulating signs in the municipality of Port Hope, for a sign at 90 Walton Street be presented to council for approval. Does staff have anything further they would like to add before we consider this report?
Through the chair to the members of council, this is also a very straightforward report, we believe. I have asked the report author, Sagar Babar, to join us this evening. If you do have any questions, by all means, I'm happy that you would direct them to him. Otherwise, no.
Is that see, we're a little rusty. It's still the beginning of 2024. We'll get there. Okay, does anyone have anything further that they would like to add before we vote on the matter? Okay, can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor yes. see how yeah, I know, right. I know. Yes, Adam, and seconded by Councillor Mink. All in favor? Thank you very much. That is passed. Moving on to report 4.3, PRC 0124, Municipal Alcohol Policy Update. The recommended action is that the Municipal Alcohol Policy Attachment 1 be presented to Council for adoption and that bylaw 53/2006 be repealed. Does staff have anything further that they would like to add before we consider this report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The existing municipal alcohol policy is coming up on 18 years, so we did feel it was time and opportunity to review and update this policy. Also reflective of changes to the AGCO, which is the commissioning body related to alcohol and gaming in Ontario. So the updates to the policy reflect all of the changes from an AGCO standpoint. We had the opportunity to work with a number of departments who manage our special event review process, as well as some of our community event partners through this review, and is presented for your consideration.
Thank you very much for that, Director. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add before we vote on this? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Just to say that I was really thrilled to see the provision, the change being made to the requirement of pouring things from recyclable cans into non-recyclable plastic cups. And I think there's a lot of young people in our community, including those that came and did their delegation to this council back in the spring, who will be pleased to see that environmental consideration being updated.
That's very true. Absolutely. So if anyone else, hey, can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Chris and seconded by Councillor Todd. And all in favor, and that is passed. Thank you. So moving on then to report 4.4, WE0124, Drinking Water Quality Management System, QMS, Commitment Re-endorsement. The recommended action is that Council re-endorse the municipality's commitment to the maintenance of quality management system, QMS, for the Port Hope drinking water system, and that the Mayor, Chief Administrative Officer, Director of Works and Engineering, and Director of Corporate Services be authorized to execute signatures on Section 3 of the QMS Operational Plan, Commitment and Endorsement. Does staff have anything further that they would like to add before we consider this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Davidson is unable to be with us this evening due to illness, but the report is fairly straightforward. It is administrative in nature. Legislation states that that policy has to be updated to be reflective of the individuals that are actually representing the roles, and obviously with the addition of myself to the team, that requires this housekeeping amendment to the document.
Thank you very much to our CAO for that. Any other questions or comments on this matter before I ask for a mover and seconder? Seeing none, can I get a mover and seconder? Councillor Les, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to report 4.5 PS 0124 Municipal Building Bylaw Update. The recommended action is that the proposed building bylaw related to the administration and enforcement of the Ontario Building Code, Attachment 1, be presented to Council for adoption, and that bylaw 10/2001 be repealed. Does staff have anything further they would like to add before we consider this report?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. The updated proposed building bylaw will provide for the administration and enforcement of the Ontario Building Code within the municipality of Port Hope with respect to the establishment and requirement of the payment of fees and information of services. This was identified as part of the service delivery review, which was conducted in our division in 2023, which made the recommendation to review and update municipal bylaws. You can see that the current bylaw, which was established in 2001, is going to be over 23 years of age. So the updates that were made were mainly administrative. And this is part of the overall review to ensure effective and efficient services to our residents. We're looking at the increased ability to address customer service in our division, and I believe that the incorporation of these administrative changes to this bylaw is one of the many steps we're taking, along with the updating of our municipal building website, which will be undertaken in the next couple of weeks in creation of an interactive website, which will reflect these new amendments to the construction bylaw. Really, the purpose of this bylaw is going to more clearly define classes of permits, the processes in which permits are obtained, and I think it's going to provide information in a much more clear and concise manner to our residents to assist them in the building process. Obviously, there's been changes to the Ontario Building Code over the past 2 decades. And we're also looking at removing the reference to the set fees and charges within the actual bylaw, and just referencing the annual updated fees and charges bylaw for the municipality. So again, mainly administrative, but again, it's one step closer and one step forward to increasing the efficiency of our customer service in our division. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Director. So does anyone have anything to add or any other questions before we vote on this matter? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Director Williams, we've had a brief conversation about this already, but I think when I was reading the proposed bylaw, I appreciated the reference where appropriate for there to be the application of discretion through the use of the word may. And I understand that there's a lot of positives to that, but in the case where there is a disagreement between around the application of that discretion, I understand that there is, I'm now filterless. I understand that there is a process, a mechanism that's outside of the municipality for appealing decisions related to the building code. And I wondered if you could speak to that and whether there's an opportunity to integrate that somewhere in the bylaw or include a link or somewhere that refers people to where they can seek information about that.
Thank you. Through the chair. That's a good point. So the remedy to in relation to an order issued under the Ontario Building Code is through an appeal to the Ontario Building Code Commission. That information is made available to our residents, but I do believe as part of the revamping of our building division bylaw, the incorporation of that information to residents to know that that remedy does exist is something that we can definitely look into and incorporate not only on our website. That information is actually indicated and provided to all residents when on their building permit and when and if an order is issued under the Ontario Building Code. So that information is provided, but I think we can do a better job in giving our residents that information. And I think incorporating that in the updating of our website is a great idea.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So through the chair, and thank you for that explanation. This document, I think is very helpful, as you explained, for the municipal side, and helping the building officials move along applications. But as you explained, that second step, which is coming, which is the resident portion of it, is crucial, and it's something that's been asked for year after year after year, where there's still a lot of confusion, and it's to be expected the standard property owner or business owner is not well informed about the Ontario Building Code. It's a huge document. It's very difficult to understand. So I'm looking forward to that tool. I think it is necessary. Otherwise, I would feel a little unbalanced. It's very municipal focused and not customer focused. So I'm looking forward to that second piece.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I just want to, great suggestion, and to just reiterate, important step in moving in a new direction, and it's promising, and the pieces will come together. So thank you for the work on that. Can I get a mover and seconder for this report? Moved by Councillor Adam and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to report 4.6, PS0224, Re-Property Standards Bylaw Update. And the recommended action is that report PS0224 be received, and that community engagement regarding the proposed revised property standards bylaw attachment 1 be undertaken in accordance with the community engagement policy, and that a revised property standards bylaw incorporating changes and recommendations following community engagement be presented to council for adoptions. So does staff have anything further that they would like to add before we consider this report?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Again, as part of the continuous effort of our division to improve our customer service relations with our members of the community and to provide the most effective and efficient delivery of services, that we underwent a review which identified, again, another bylaw that was outdated. The property standards bylaw for a municipality was put forward to council in 2006. So almost 18 years old. The review of the current bylaw revealed many areas of improvement administratively, and required implementation of additional requirements under the Building Code Act. The review also identified areas of the Property Standards Committee which is required to be updated to reflect the current status of the committee, as well as ensuring the alignment with the upcoming municipal committee bylaw housekeeping amendments, which will be forthcoming in 2024 from the clerk's office. So that's also incorporated within the body of the new suggested bylaw. Several of the areas that have been amended, I'll just highlight, are areas such as the inclusion of nuisance lighting, shipping containers, vacant and damaged buildings, fire damaged buildings, marijuana grow houses, and designated heritage buildings. And these additional provisions have been added to our property standards bylaw because these are issues that our officers are dealing with on a very frequent basis. This gives our officers additional tools to ensure that our municipality is safe and that people and residents can enjoy their property. A significant change to the property standards bylaw that you'll see is the addition of a designated heritage building section, which gives our officers the tools under the Ontario Heritage Act to enforce provisions of the Property Standards Act, specifically related to designated heritage buildings within our municipality, which I know is important to everyone in our community. So that is a significant change and an additional tool to our officers. Now, as part of the establishment of this bylaw, a community engagement strategy has been worked on. I've actually met with Kate Schuker today. We have a meeting about many things, but we have a campaign that we'll be putting forward to ensure we have a more fulsome community engagement session which is going to incorporate not only my Port Hope website, the municipal website, social media, to ensure we reach as many residents through as many areas within our community that we can. So I'll be working with Kate and her team over the next couple of weeks to get that community engagement strategy in place and implemented.
Thank you for that. And I'll go around the table and, okay, well, we'll just go in, or I don't know who had their, okay, Councillor Les, and then we'll move on to Councillor Todd, and we'll just move down the table.
Just a question on the Property Standards Committee. Will they be only handling the cases that are under appeal, or will they be looking at everything that comes across our desks?
I think I'll let the clerk answer that. Yes.
They're only going to be handling appeals.
Yep. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that the heritage part's in here. You're right. It's absolutely important to the community, and a long time coming that we nail some of that down. Has there been some consideration given that specifically calls out the Heritage Advisory Committee giving feedback on this because of the intersection there?
Thank you for the comment. I've actually, while I was drafting this bylaw, in communication with Director Davis, our planner, Sagar Babar as well, and directly had communication with the Heritage Advisory Committee. So they were actually provided a draft copy of this bylaw to make comment on, and those comments have been included in the proposed bylaw.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question at you, Director, maybe for the clerk as well. So I've sat here and I've heard about outdated bylaws, and I think you would agree the bylaws are the nexus of how we operate here within the municipality. And some have been 20 years, couple decades. What, if any, mechanism or control do we have, system, to make sure that we don't visit this gap again 20 years from now for existing bylaws? Do we have something in place that the municipality, the community can say, yes, well, this bylaw is going to be visited again in 2 years, 3 years? Do we have something in place for not just this bylaw, but the cast of our bylaws?
This is a very good question, Councillor Collins, and it is a question that many staff across municipalities also ask. But currently, it's a capacity issue, and a lot of the bylaws many times don't even need to be updated. Some of them do, some of them don't. Currently, there is no sunshine clause on our bylaws. So as and when there is a capacity to review and to ensure that they need to be revised if necessary, amended, then those are brought forward to council for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins, for raising this. Our clerk is quite right. This is an ongoing concern with many municipalities across the province, as we tend to, as we're moving forward and have strategic priorities and we're trying to drive those things forward and deal with customer service initiatives, et cetera, the tools in the belt sometimes get rusty. And those are the bylaws and policies, et cetera. That said, moving forward, it's going to be a priority of myself and the staffing complement to ensure that there's a tool in place, a tracking tool, so that we can at least have an internal conversation at certain points throughout the life of a document to ensure that it is continuing to be viable. And I think the service delivery reviews that have been completed have highlighted a lot of those documents to the SLT team and have already created a document that Director Williams is using. It's that his service delivery review highlighted many documents that needed to be updated. So that's the start of the list. That said, you don't want to get into this perpetual routine where, 20 years from now we're looking, oh, we need another service delivery review, and that's going to prompt. So I understand the question, and it definitely has merit, and the SLT will take a look at it and see if we can put some sort of tracking mechanism in place. May not always come back to council, those that require council, whether it's an amendment or a repeal and replace, but at least internally we're having those conversations so that they can get appropriately placed on an action list moving forward.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, Director, and the CEO. That's exactly what we're looking for, some kind of track mechanism. We've talked about some sensitivity issues here, not just this evening, but at others, and it's nice to have that. It's refreshing from a municipality point of view. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I have two things. One is in relation to, well, they're both in relation to the public engagement strategy. So when we're done discussion, I do have an amendment I'd like to propose to the motion that would also refer this to the Environmental Advisory Committee for review. There are a couple of clauses there that I think they should be looked at from a sustainability perspective. But the other thing I just wanted to comment on, and I think will be really important when we're thinking through how we do the public engagement and consultation, is throughout this document, there's a tension, I think, between our values around aesthetics, but also, I think, an increasing concern that exists in the community about whether Port Hope is an affordable place to live, and increasingly becoming unaffordable for many existing residents and potential future residents. So I would really like to see in the public engagement that we're looking at that and making sure that we're providing members of the public with an opportunity to weigh in on where that balance should exist for Port Hope as we exist today. We all want to have a beautiful community that's, looks nice and is aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time, we have financial constraints that are very real. And some of the things that were included in here have real price tags to them that we will be now imposing on residents. So I'm not sure how that will be accomplished, but when you're thinking through the public consultation and what kinds of questions are being asked, I think it's going to be really important to look at that tension. And as part of that, I think another challenge that we'll have with the public engagement is figuring out how on this piece especially, we're going to reach a real cross-section of our community. We do know we tend to get a lot of responses from a particular demographic in our community that may lean one way or another on that tension between aesthetics and affordability. So I think we really need to make sure that we're hearing from a cross section on that issue so we know we're creating the right balance that's going to work for the community as a whole. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So just to carry on with the deputy mayors, suggestion asking for this to be forwarded along to the environmental committee. Could this is it typical that it will be forwarded to all committees to have the option, such as the accessibility committee or any other committee that may feel a necessity or a want to weigh in on this?
That would be a direction from council. So when the public engagement does come forward, if council wishes for it to be forwarded to all the committees for review and comment back, I think the only thing that I would caution council is that, first of all, our committees are currently under recruitment. So it will be a few weeks before the recruitment process is complete. So there may be some time lag in terms of when they have an opportunity to review and then provide comment on the document. And the other thing I would also like to point out to council is that moving forward, if this is a strategy that we do want to take, that this kind of direction that you want to provide to staff, then we do have to be mindful of, again, timelines, because we have to wait until the next meeting of the committee. And so I just want to provide that information to council for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. So, and then I would ask Deputy Mayor Claire, when you make that amendment, if it could be broader than just the environmental committee. Okay, and then the second question or comment I had is, I appreciate the new approach we are doing to surveys where we're collecting some data. And I know that's a work in progress. But I would just like to say, if there is an opportunity with this next survey, if that's what we're doing, to potentially look for opportunities to take that data maybe to another level of analysis where it's not in every scenario, but there may be scenarios where it's like 50% chose option B. Okay, now what is the demographic of that 50%? And are they rural? Are they urban? Just to give us a little bit more information. Is that not possible?
I can speak to that through the chair. The tool that we currently use, I'm going to look into it because I don't want to give a definitive answer before going back and looking at the tool that we use. I don't think that we can do that with the tool that we currently use. Like to that level, we obviously have some analytics and some data analysis built into it, but I don't believe it can drill down quite that specific. But I'll get back to you on that and double check it.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm not asking for like a huge analysis, but just some key answers that might help understand exactly where that answer is coming from, so we're not making assumptions. And
sure, we can look into that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam's good, but I do have a few comments and questions as well. So, thank you for bringing up the community consultation piece, and I know we bring it up often, so we're bringing it up in the context of this discussion, but I know that it was something we discussed at budget time as well, and it's something that's come up at this table again, is the perpetual question of how do we reach the broadest base of our community, ensuring that we have good representation from both our wards, and also that we have an appropriate spread of demographics across all the different factors that are in line with EDI and the position that this council has taken. And so if we don't have the tools that can drill down, I would suggest that it might be a good opportunity for us to start looking at some of those tools, because this is a consistent theme that comes up at this table, and there's obviously an appetite at this council table to have more information that comes directly from the public when we do go out and do consultations. And we do know that just providing websites or surveys isn't always been effective, and we're even more challenged now with the change in media, as we've also talked about at this table. But I have a couple of other separate questions. One is and this is just a curiosity question, is the addition of the designated heritage buildings within this document, does it conflict or overlap with any other existing bylaws that we already have? It was a question that came to my mind. And then secondly, when Director Williams, when you talk about the fact that this provides our staff with more robust tools and instruments, I'm wondering, to what extent do we have teeth then in enforcing this? Are folks going to be getting warnings? Do we have financial fines that are at our disposal? Because it strikes me that we do have a number of vacant and damaged buildings and other heritage buildings that are not in good repair and are serious safety concerns for members of the Port Hope public.
So thank you for the question. So our goal is always to gain compliance to ensure the safety of our community. And our first step in that is education and information sharing. That's our first step always, to try to gain compliance through educating either property owners or individuals about the requirements of our bylaws. If required, an order can be issued under the Ontario Building Code related to property standards, such items as you're referring to as unsafe structures. And that's actually an addition to abandoned buildings. So that wasn't incorporated. So now we have that tool, because like you said, we do have these buildings. We do have these fire damaged buildings that we don't have the ability to actually deal with now. So that does give us additional tools. The next step in the process would be issue an order, a property standards order. So that could be related to property cleanup, the cutting of grass, the repair of a structure. Time would be given to the property owner to comply with that section of the property standards order. And if not, we have several mechanisms to follow up. We can actually undertake the work, and that the charges associated with that work the municipality undertakes, such as the cutting of one's grass, would then be put on the owner's tax bill. Or we could, charges could be laid under the Property Standards Act, and the owner could be taken to court, where a fine could be imposed by the provincial courts, which would be obviously the last resource, the last resource we would utilize, something that we do not want to do.
Thank you. And I think there was just a little other question that was embedded in there
Sure.
about the different bylaws. Is there any overlap with any existing bylaws?
So in relation to the heritage, this specifically, the property standards provisions does provide provisions for such things as exterior of a structure, but because this is, we're talking now the exterior of a designated building, they don't overlap. They may be speaking about the same type of item, but because a building is designated, there's no overlap. So, and also just to speak about remedy as well, when it comes to property standards, you'll see within the bylaw and the establishment of the Property Standards Committee, if someone is issued a order under by property standards officer, they can seek remedy from the order through the property standards and appeal through the Property Standards Committee as well. So that remedy always exists for our residents.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Anyone else with any comments or questions? If not, I think the Deputy Mayor has a motion that she would like to put forward.
Yeah, I have a motion to amend that item 3 of the recommendation be revised to read that a revised property standards bylaw incorporating changes and recommendations following community engagement and feedback from the Environmental Advisory Committee and Accessibility Advisory Committee. Accessibility Committee? Advisory Committee, yes. Once it has been they have been convened, be presented to Council for adoption. And I did have a quick question about that. So in the existing recommendation, it says that community engagement per the community engagement policy. There is a clause in that policy that itemizes the responsibility of Council. And one of the items is 3.3, that members of Council will ensure that the necessary level of community engagement has been conducted as appropriate before municipal decisions are made. So my question is a procedural one to the clerk. If that is already part of the policy and we have a motion that says per the policy, do we need to specify all of the pieces that those pieces of direction, or is that already captured in our discussion and covered by that clause?
So that's a good question, Deputy Mayor. And my comment there would be that if you are wishing to refer a matter to a committee for specific comment, then absolutely that should be a direction of Council, right? Because that is one of the purposes of the advisory committee, is to take that direction from Council and then provide feedback and advice to Council on that particular matter, in line with their terms of reference. In this case, absolutely. If, as per the community engagement policy, if you wish to take this matter to the Accessibility Advisory Committee or Environmental Advisory Committee for general feedback, and then provide that feedback to the staff, then you are, I believe, if I understand correctly, in line with that policy. Yes.
And just to be clear, so then this is a matter of a Council referral. So this will be, because it's been a motion of Council, it will automatically then be placed on the agenda for those committees under the referrals from Council.
That's correct.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to read that out? I'm sure our clerk has captured that, as she always does. So, okay. But you do have the wording. Okay. So who would like to second the motion? Councillor Mink. Any further discussion of the motion? Do we need to read the motion out one last time, or okay?
So that item 3 of the recommendation, so this is the amendment only. that item 3 of the recommendation be revised to read as follows: that the revised property standards bylaw, incorporating changes and recommendations following community engagement, as well as feedback from the Environmental Advisory Committee and the Accessibility Advisory Committee, once they have been convened, be presented to Council for adoption. And it's moved by Deputy Mayor Claire Holloway-Wadhwani and Councillor Mink, seconded by Councillor Mink.
Okay, so we can take a motion, a vote on that. Do we need to return to the original motion?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're voting now on the revised motion on the table. We have an amendment. We have a mover and a seconder, and all in favor? Oh, question? Okay.
Respond so that we're not left out hanging, waiting for them to meet.
My suggestion would be, as now the council members will be the chairs of all of the advisory committees, that they should be bringing this forward to them for immediate review and response.
Okay, any other questions before we take a final vote? Okay, so all in favor? And passed unanimously. Now we'll return back to the original motion. I'm not going to read it out again. We had a mover and a seconder for that.
No, we did not, Madam Mayor.
We did not? Okay, so just reverting back then, do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Adam, seconded by Councillor Less. All in favor? Okay, and that is approved unanimously. Okay, moving on to report 4.7, PS 0324 Retransport Canada Rail Safety Program Grant. The recommended action is that Council receive staff report PS 0324 for information. Does staff have anything further that they would like to add before we consider this remarkably good news report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In 2022, the municipality of Port Hope conducted a community risk assessment, which incorporated a hazard identification risk analysis, which identified rail as a potential hazard to our community. In 2023, Transport Canada developed a program to enhance rail safety engagement grant. The purpose of this program was to support activities that increase participation in developing and improving Canada's rail safety system. In February 2023, I submitted application for the grant, and we just received notification in December of last year that we received a grant of $75,000, which we utilized to support the development and implementation of a municipal rail safety program, which includes the continuity of operations plan for our municipality. So this is just another step forward to ensure the safety of our residents, and we're going to be very happy that we're able to do this and utilize the grant to complete this work.
Thank you very much, Director Williams. Congratulations on the grant. Congratulations on the work. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Adam.
Thank you, and I completely agree that this is great news, and I just wish that we had somebody out in the audience, Mr. Ed White, to be here. I know that he had a question about this months ago, so I wish he was here to see this happen.
Yes, Councillor Lass.
Could some attention be given to inspecting the viaduct and the state of the nation up there in terms of it's getting pretty dated. That metal, I know, has got some holes in it that we should address. And if we do discover something, does this allow us to have any teeth in going back to the various rail carriers and with any demands?
So the grant really is to fund engagement both externally and internally, so which incorporate such things as rail lines, community groups, first responders, folks who conduct those bridge inspections to provide us that data that identify potential risks to our community. Now, this is to establish the actual rail safety plan, so we're going to identify the risks and the hazards that are moving through our community on a daily basis, and how we're going to address and respond to an incident that are involving those particular items on the rail. And we're also going to be developing that continuity of operations plan. So when and if something does occur, we're ready, able, to respond adequately. Now, it's not putting us in a position to collect data to utilize to go after the rail companies. It's more of putting us in a position to adequately respond to an incident involving the rail line in itself, which will incorporate the identification of issues such as the bridge or the rail tracks in themselves. And that's why we're including technical experts in the development of this plan. So, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Councillor Adam.
Thank you. To go, and how far does that go all the way down, like past Dickinson? Will that report go all the way through there? I know there's bridges on Dickinson there that maybe need to be addressed a little bit.
Thank you. The plan is going to incorporate all rail lines within a municipality. So identification and the risk associated with those rail lines and how we're going to adequately respond to an incident involving them.
Okay, can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Less. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. So we have no notices of motion on the agenda tonight. In terms of updates and new business, a good time was had by all at Sunday's Celebrate and Skate event, which took place at Jack Berger Sports Complex. Thanks to all who dropped by for a chat and a skate to celebrate the new year with the council, and in particular to our CAO who came and joined us on her birthday. So for more ways, and I didn't even know because I was so busy skating around, so thank you for doing that, for joining us. For more ways to connect with council throughout the year, please visit porthope.ca/connect-with-council. Do any council members have any updates related to council business that they would like to share? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to question period. It's now time for question period. Remember, question period is for questions only and is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Please keep your questions direct, and we will start with councillors. Any questions? Yes. I'm going to start actually down there. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Director Williams there. Parking bylaw review, do we expect that on our next council?
Thank you for the question. No. So we actually are meeting tomorrow. So internal stakeholders, so myself, bylaw enforcement team, members of the roads department, this is the first meeting to kind of initiate that process. What you're going to see is an amendment that needs to be made to update the fees and charges associated with the parking bylaw. That needs to happen. And now what we're doing is we're collecting data and information to see if a more fulsome review is warranted, and if so, what needs to be incorporated in that review.
So just a general estimate on time?
That's a good question. So I think we're going to see at least an administrative update shortly, because we need to amend the associated fines in the current bylaw to reflect the new fees and charges. So you will see that parking bylaw update soon. I would suggest within the next 30 days. The more fulsome, comprehensive review is going to take some time. So we're going to look at that, and the first step is our internal stakeholder meeting, which is going to happen tomorrow.
Yes, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My question is for Director Davis. And the question relates to, it's a question we've all received because we've all been copied on some emails related to the removal of the trees. And I want to be clear, this isn't a question about the minutes of settlement or the trees of significance that were the minutes of settlement. That question has been answered and on a very quick as the trees were coming down. But there's been some confusion, I think, for the members of the public related to what were perceived as being boundary trees on the municipal property along Victoria Street South. And I think and those have now also been removed. And I think part of the confusion where the questions are coming from is that there were visual display boards at a PIC that was held in the fall about the upcoming construction work on Victoria Street South that showed those trees still standing. And there were some questions asked of staff at that time where the answer was that the work to the roadworks was not going to impact those trees. And then there was also confusion, I think, created by the fact that the tree removal of the forest itself took place, and then there was a 2-week gap over the holidays where those what were perceived as boundary trees were left standing and then were subsequently removed. So we're getting a lot of questions from residents about when was the decision made that the municipality would allow the removal of trees that were on the municipal side of that property or boundary trees that were shared between the private property and the municipal property? When was that decision made? And why was that decision made to allow that to move forward?
Thank you for that question. I think what would be really helpful is to backtrack a little bit in terms of some of the communication that we received directly as a council from Director Gilmore on December the 18th, which I read out at the council meeting, and maybe use that to then pivot to anything, Director Davis, that you would like to add or elaborate on. So on the 18th of December, we received an update from Director Gilmer that I had read out word for word at our last council meeting, and the message was as follows, just so that we're starting on the same page. In late November, the municipality retained SEMA Plus to review the preliminary landscape plan as per the settlement. Their ISA certified arborist reviewed the trees in question and determined the following. Trees are growing close together along with many other trees with a low live crown ratio, a characteristic that is typical of trees growing in groups. The trunks are tall, the foliage is all towards the top of the canopy, and there's very little taper in the trunk diameter. Trees growing in these conditions rely on each other for support, and when neighboring trees are removed, the remaining trees have a difficulty adapting to the change in exposure to sunlight and wind level, and the likelihood of failure increases significantly. To remove trees throughout the woodlot for new construction, it is not trees within the group. From a tree risk, a failure would be probable, and the construction of new homes inside would create a new potential targets that could be impacted, and it was that the 4 trees in question be removed in addition to others. So that was that we all received on December 18th and what I shared at the last council meeting. So Director Days, is there something that you want to just follow up on?
Sure, through the chair to the deputy mayor. So predicated on that report, and we contracted SEMA Plus to provide us with some overview as to the tree removal and the landscape plan. It was determined internally by staff, having taken or relying on the expertise of that organization, that it was appropriate for us, or from a public health and safety perspective, we felt it necessary to support the recommendation from SEMA, which is why we allowed them to go ahead with the removal of the trees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I just want to be very clear, because that response was provided publicly in relation to the quote-unquote trees of significance that were slated to be preserved as part of the minutes of settlement. Is that also the answer for when and why the boundary trees along that entire street were to be removed? I just want to be clear that because those are 2 different sets of trees that we're talking about.
Through the chair to the deputy mayor, we had SEMA Plus come and provide services to us on the site on November 26th. We went through all of the trees, all of them that were marked from trees of significance perspective and a trees of boundary perspective. And we received feedback from that organization, which we rely on to do work for us, that our best move forward was to have them removed.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm sure that will be helpful for us to be able to share with the members of the public.
Okay, any other questions around the table? No. Questions from the media? Seeing none. Any questions from the public? Please come forward. And please do remember to press the button and to introduce yourself and provide your address. And if the question is related to personal property or an operational matter, we are going to ask our constituents to reach out to relevant departments, and we'll pass on the information for further assistance. So we'll be happy to take a question, but if it is around personal property issues or operational matters, we will be referring the question directly to staff.
Good evening, Dan James at 3191 County Road 10 in the Hamlet of Welcome. Thank you for having me come up and hear my questions. I have three. Just a quick question. Is there any further update on 50 Cabin Street? I know some of the staff was short at the last meeting before Christmas when I asked the same question. I'm just wondering if there's anything else.
Thank you for that question. I'd like to refer that question to staff.
Thank you very much for your question. We do appreciate the community concern when it comes to certain properties. We can assure you that municipal staff are taking all concerns and considerations in regards to all properties and moving forward with policies and bylaws that are in place to ensure that the health and safety of all residents are of prime concern. But as far as any details in regards to that property, we're not going to speak to them publicly at this time.
I'm with a nonprofit organization here in town, the Ganaraska Railway Modelers Association, and we much appreciate the update in the building over at the rec center and the space that we've been able to rent from you. There's been an issue that's ongoing that I have not been able to come up with a resolve, and it's we're able to rent more space in that facility, but the facility cannot supply us with enough tables and chairs for the rented space. We've been referred to, I believe, the Agricultural Society maybe, or whoever's in the barn for the tables there. 4 to 5 calls in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I've not been able to rectify the issue. I've also talked to Tim at the Jack Burger with no resolve as well.
Thank you for that question, and certainly we've recorded it, and we'll make sure that a staff person gets back to you in short order to answer that.
I'd like to say thank you to that, as our show is coming up for the 23rd and 24th of February, so it's getting a little tight. We've actually had to start turning vendors and different services away from the show. And now we're in a conflict where there's been payment for the space, but we're still not provided with what we require.
We'll further note that there's time constraints on this question.
And lastly, I don't know if you can speak to it yet. I'm not sure on the timing, but is there any update on the tender for the Walton Street?
I will pass that question on to our CAO.
There isn't an update. The tender closes on January 31st, so it's still open.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for being in attendance and engaging and asking the questions. Any other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, this concludes our business to be covered on today's agenda, and I'm in a position to adjourn the meeting. The Committee of the Whole is adjourned now, and it is 7:28 p.m. Thank you. Have a good evening.